The year was 2247, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After centuries of wondering if they were alone in the universe, humans discovered the answer was no. The galaxy was full of life. Hundreds of alien species had built empires and trade routes across thousands of worlds. They had been watching Earth for a long time, waiting for humans to develop faster than light travel. Now that humanity had arrived, the aliens were not impressed. Sergeant Cole stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel Horizon and watched the massive space station grow larger as they approached. Prime was one of the biggest trading hubs in the sector. Ships from dozens of species docked there every day. It was neutral ground where enemies could meet and do business without fighting. At least that was the idea. Was 32 years old with short brown hair and a compact muscular build. Before joining the Space Marines, she had been a professional fighter back on Earth. She had won 3 world championships in mixed martial arts before deciding she wanted to do something more meaningful with her skills. The military had welcomed her with open arms. Now she was part of a security detail protecting Ambassador Henry on humanity's first official visit to Prime. It was supposed to be a simple diplomatic mission: meet with representatives from other species, establish trade agreements, show the galaxy that humans were ready to be part of the community. Lieutenant Ben Carter walked up beside her. He was her commanding officer, a tall man with gray eyes and a calm demeanor. He had been in the service for 15 years and had seen things that most humans could not imagine. "First time seeing a station this big?" he asked. Nodded. "Earth has nothing like this. How many people live here?" "About 2 million at any given time. Traders, merchants, workers, criminals. It is a rough place, Cole. Stay alert." The Horizon docked without incident, and the delegation prepared to disembark. Ambassador was a small man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He believed strongly that humanity could find its place among the stars through peace and cooperation. Hoped he was right, but she had her doubts. The airlock opened and they stepped onto the station. The first thing noticed was the smell. It was a mixture of strange foods, engine oil, and alien bodies. The second thing she noticed was the starring. Every alien they passed stopped to look at them, some with curiosity, some with disgust, a few with what looked like hunger. A group of station officials met them at the dock. Most were a species of thin, blue-skinned humanoids who handled much of the administrative work on Prime. They were polite but clearly nervous about something. "Welcome to Prime," the lead official said. "We are honored by your visit. Please follow us to the diplomatic quarter." They walked through crowded corridors filled with aliens of every shape and size. Kept her hand near her sidearm, watching for threats. She noticed that other species moved out of their way, but not out of respect. They moved the same way people on Earth moved away from something unpleasant. Then she saw them. They were impossible to miss. They stood over 9 feet tall with thick green scales covering their bodies. Their arms were as big as tree trunks and their claws looked sharp enough to cut through metal. They walked through the crowd like they owned the station, and everyone scrambled to get out of their path. A group of 4 blocked the corridor ahead. They did not move as the human delegation approached. The lead was enormous even by his species standards. A scar ran across his face from his forehead to his jaw, his yellow eyes fixed on the humans with obvious contempt. "These are the new species," he said in a deep, rumbling voice. "They are even smaller than I expected. Look at them. They are like children." The other laughed. It was an ugly sound, like rocks grinding together. Ambassador stepped forward with a diplomatic smile. "Greetings. I am Ambassador representing Earth and humanity. We come in peace and hope to establish friendly relations with all species." The looked down at him for a long moment. Then he reached out and shoved the ambassador hard, stumbled backward and fell to the ground. The spat on the floor near his head. "Friendly relations," the alien mocked. "You are prey animals who learn to build ships, nothing more. Know your place, human." Moved before she could think. She stepped between the fallen ambassador and her body tense and ready. She looked up at the massive alien without fear. "Touch him again and we will have a problem," she said. The stared at her with something like amusement. "A female threatens me. Your species is even more foolish than I thought." "Cole, stand down," Lieutenant Carter ordered. His voice was firm. "That is an order." Held her ground for another second, then stepped back. She helped Ambassador to his feet while the laughed and walked away. The one looked back over his shoulder. "My name is," he called out. "Remember it, humans, you will learn to fear it." The diplomatic quarter was quiet and secure, but the mood among the humans was dark. Ambassador tried to remain positive, insisting that they did not represent all alien species, but had seen the way the other aliens watched the encounter. None of them had intervened. None of them had even looked surprised. That night could not sleep. She walked through the section of the station that humans were allowed to access, trying to understand this new world they had entered. She stopped at a small bar and ordered a drink she could not pronounce. The bartender was an old with tired eyes. He looked at her with something like pity. "You are one of the new humans," he said. "I am sorry for what happened today. They are brutal, but they are powerful. No one challenges them." "Why not?" asked. "Because they destroy anyone who tries. They respect only strength, and they are the strongest species in this sector. Your people would be wise to stay quiet and stay small." Finished her drink in silence. When she returned to the horizon, Lieutenant Carter was waiting for her with bad news. "3 human traders have gone missing on the station," he said. "They were from an independent cargo ship. Station security claims they left voluntarily, but their ship is still docked and their belongings are still in their quarters." "Someone took them," said. "It was not a question." "Probably, but we have no authority here and no proof. The ambassador wants us to let it go." Thought about in the way he had looked at them, like they were nothing, like they were prey. "I'm not letting it go," she said. Carter sighed but did not argue. He had seen that look in her eyes before. Once Cole decided to do something, nothing in the galaxy could stop her. The lower levels of Prime were nothing like the clean corridors above. Down here the lights flickered and the walls were stained with substances did not want to identify. The air was thick and hot and the crowds were rougher. This was where the station kept its secrets. Corporal Shaw walked beside her, his hand resting on his weapon. He was young, maybe 25, with red hair and freckles that made him look even younger. But he was a good soldier, and he had volunteered to help without hesitation when told him her plan. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "If Carter finds out we left the secure zone, he will have us scrubbing decks for a year." "3 humans are missing," replied. "Nobody else is looking for them. That makes it our job." They had spent hours gathering information, had talked to traders, workers, and anyone else who would speak to her. Most aliens ignored her or told her to go away. But a few had been willing to share what they knew, especially after she bought them drinks or offered credits. The story she pieced together was disturbing. Humans had been disappearing from the station for months, not just from the Horizons delegation but from independent ships and trading posts throughout the sector. The disappearances were quiet and careful. No bodies, no evidence, just people who vanished and were never seen again. One name kept coming up in her investigation. He was a who ran some kind of business in the deepest levels of the station. Nobody would tell her exactly what kind of business, but everyone seemed afraid of him. And found the entrance to his territory after an hour of searching. It was a heavy metal door guarded by 2 massive warriors. They looked at the humans with the same contempt had shown. "Humans are not welcome here," one guard said. "Leave now or we will make you leave." Considered her options. She could try to talk her way in, but that seemed unlikely to work. She could try to fight, but taking on 2 in a narrow corridor was not a good plan. She needed another approach. "We have credits," she said. "We want to see the entertainment." The guards looked at each other. One of them laughed. "Entertainment, you want to see the arena?" "Yes," said, hoping she was guessing correctly. "We heard it is worth watching." The guard studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. "Your credits are good, but do not cause trouble, human. You will not like what happens if you do." The door opened, and in stepped through into a world of blood and violence. The arena was a massive underground chamber carved out of the station's hull. Thousands of aliens sat in tiered seats surrounding a circular pit in the center. The pit was stained dark with old blood. The crowd roared and cheered as two creatures fought below, tearing at each other with claws and teeth. Felt sick but kept her face neutral. She had seen fighting rings before back on Earth, but this was different. This was not sport. This was slaughter. "Look," whispered, pointing to a section of the crowd. Followed his gaze and felt her blood turn cold. In a caged area near the pit she saw them. Humans. At least a dozen of them locked behind bars like animals. They were thin and bruised, their eyes hollow with fear and exhaustion. Some wore torn clothing. Others wore almost nothing at all. They are using them as fighters, realized. They are throwing humans into the pit for entertainment. A female sat in an elevated platform overlooking the arena. She wore expensive jewelry and watched the fighting with bored eyes. Beside her stood a massive who could only be. He was even bigger than, his scales darker and his eyes colder. He looked down at the pit with the expression of someone watching insects. The fight below ended with a wet crunch. The crowd cheered as the winner, a four-armed creature, raised its bloody limbs in triumph. The loser did not move again. "Next match," announced in a booming voice, "a human male against a warrior." The cage opened and guards dragged out one of the human prisoners. He was a young man, maybe 30 years old, with terror written across his face. He was pushed into the pit while the crowd laughed and jeered. They entered from the other side. It was the same species as the previous winner, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp blades of chitin. It clicked its mandibles eagerly as it approached the helpless human. Started to move forward but grabbed her arm. "We cannot help him," he whispered urgently. "There are hundreds of here. We will die and so will he." Watched as the human tried to run, caught him in seconds. The crowd cheered, forced herself to watch until it was over. She would remember this. She would make them pay. They slipped out of the arena and made their way back toward the upper levels. But they did not get far. A group of guards blocked their path, stood at the front, his face twisted in an ugly smile. "The little human female," he said. "I wondered if you would come looking for your missing people. Your species is predictable." More guards appeared behind them. They were surrounded. "You should not have come here," continued. "But since you did, you will join the others in the cage. Always needs more entertainment." They were grabbed and dragged back down to the arena. Did not fight. Not yet. She needed to wait for the right moment. They were taken before, who looked down at them with mild interest. "More humans," he said. "The female looks strong for her kind. She might last longer than the others." "She was part of the diplomatic group," reported. "A soldier." Leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "A soldier? How interesting. Tell me, human, do you know how to fight?" Met his gaze without flinching. "Better than anyone you have ever seen." The arena master laughed and the crowd laughed with him, but did not smile. "I will make you a deal," she said. "Let me fight in the arena. If I win, all the human prisoners go free." Stopped laughing. He stared at her with new interest. "And if you lose?" "Then you have one more dead human to throw away." Stepped forward angrily. "This is ridiculous. She is a tiny female. She will die in seconds." "Perhaps," said slowly, "but it would be amusing to watch her try." "Very well, human, I accept your terms. Tomorrow you will fight in the arena. When you die, your friend will take your place, and I will keep taking humans until there are none left." Was thrown into the cage with the other prisoners. Landed beside her a moment later. The other humans stared at them with hopeless eyes. "What did you just do?" asked. Looked through the bars at the blood-stained pit below. Tomorrow she would stand down there. Tomorrow she would show these aliens what humans were really made of. "I bought us a chance," she said. "That is all we need." The night before her first fight did not sleep. She sat in the corner of the cage and prepared her mind for what was coming. The other human prisoners watched her with a mixture of hope and pity. They had seen too many people die in the arena to believe she had any real chance. A young woman named crawled over to sit beside her. She had been captured 3 months ago from a trading vessel. Her eyes were haunted, but there was still a spark of life in them. "You really think you can win?" asked quietly. "I know I can," replied. "How? Those things out there are monsters. I watched them tear apart a man twice your size in less than a minute." Looked at her hands. They were small compared to but they had trained for over 20 years. She had broken bones with these hands. She had choked out opponents who outweighed her by 100 pounds. She had learned to turn an enemy's strength against them and to find weakness where others saw none. "Humans evolved on Earth," said. "Our planet has stronger gravity than most worlds. Our bones are denser. Our muscles are more compact. We had to develop endurance to survive because we could not outrun the predators that hunted us. So we learned to outlast them. We learned to be patient. We learned to fight smart." Did not look convinced. "The aliens do not think we are anything special. That is their mistake." Morning came too quickly. Guards opened the cage and dragged out. They stripped her of her uniform and gave her basic fighting clothes, a simple shirt and pants that would not protect her from anything. She was pushed toward the pit while the crowd began to fill the seats above. Sat in his elevated platform, looking down with anticipation. Stood nearby, eager to watch the human female die. Word had spread throughout the station about the challenge, and the arena was packed with spectators from dozens of species. They had come to see a slaughter. "Today we have special entertainment," announced to the crowd. "A human female has challenged our arena. She believes she can defeat our fighters and win freedom for her people. Let us show her how wrong she is." The crowd roared with laughter and approval. "Her first opponent will be a warrior. Begin." A gate opened on the far side of the pit, and the scuttled out. It was the same species that had killed the human man the night before. 4 arms, each ending in blades of hardened chitin. Multiple eyes that tracked movement with perfect precision. Mandibles that clicked together in anticipation of the kill. The charged immediately, its bladed arms raised to strike. The crowd expected the human to freeze or try to run. That was what prey did. Did neither. She watched the approach, reading its movement and timing its attack. At the last possible moment, she stepped to the side. Those blades cut through empty air where she had been standing a fraction of a second before. Before the creature could recover, grabbed one of its arms and pivoted her body. She used this own momentum against it, adding her strength to its forward motion. The alien flipped through the air and crashed onto its back with a sound like breaking branches. Did not hesitate. She dropped her knee onto the creature's thorax and drove her elbow into the cluster of nerves at the base of its skull. She had studied xenobiology during her training. She knew where the weak points were. The went limp. The arena fell completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They stared at the tiny human standing over the motionless body of a warrior. Leaned forward in his seat, his eyes narrow. "Another opponent," he ordered. A second gate opened and a new creature entered the pit. This one was a species that looked like a cross between a bear and an ape. It stood 7 feet tall with thick gray fur and massive fists that could crush stone. They were known for their strength and their rage. The creature bellowed and charged with its arms spread wide. It wanted to grab her and squeeze until her bones broke. That was how fought. They overwhelmed their opponents with raw power. Ran toward it. The crowd gasped. Running toward a charging was suicide, but dropped into a slide at the last moment, passing between the creature's legs. She came up behind it and leaped onto its back before it could turn around. The thrashed and roared, trying to reach her with its massive arms, but its limbs were too bulky and too slow. Wrapped her arm around its thick neck and squeezed, cutting off the blood flow to its brain. The stumbled. It spun in circles trying to shake her off. It slammed its back against the arena wall, crushing between its body and the stone. Pain exploded through her ribs, but she did not let go. 30 seconds later, the collapsed. The crowd was no longer laughing. They watched in stunned silence as the small human female stood over yet another fallen opponent. Blood dripped from a cut on her forehead, but she stood straight and showed no fear. Another commanded, his voice tight with anger. More opponents came. A species of quick reptilian fighters with venomous claws, avoided its attacks until it tired, then broke its arm and used its own venom against it. A hulking brute with 4 legs and armored skin. She found the gaps in its armor and struck the soft flesh beneath until it could no longer stand. By her 5th victory, the crowd had changed. Some still jeered, but others watched with something new in their eyes. Respect, fear, wonder. A human female was doing what should have been impossible. She was winning. And the other prisoners pressed against the bars of their cage, watching with desperate hope. Was crying, but they were tears of joy. Stood from his seat, his massive form trembling with rage. He had never seen anything like this. His arena had hosted thousands of fights. Champions from dozens of species had fallen in this pit. And now a single human, a female no less, was making fools of them all. Enough, he bellowed. Tomorrow she will face our true champion. Tomorrow she will learn what real strength means. He pointed down at with one clawed finger. Tomorrow she fights. The crowd erupted, was undefeated. He had killed over 200 opponents in the arena. He was the most feared warrior on the station, possibly in the entire sector. Looked up at the who had started all of this. He grinned down at her with anticipation. Rest well, little human, he called out. Tomorrow I will show the galaxy what you really are. Did not respond. She let the guards drag her back to the cage and throw her inside. Her body ached and her ribs were probably cracked, but she felt something she had not felt since arriving on the station. Hoping. She could beat him. She knew she could. Tomorrow she would show these aliens something they would never forget. The day of the final fight arrived with a tension that hung over the entire station. Word had spread far beyond the arena. Aliens from every corner of Prime had heard the story. A human female had defeated 5 opponents, and now she would face the undefeated champion of the pit. Ships had delayed their departures just to watch. The arena was so packed that people stood in the corridors outside, watching on screens. Spent the morning in the cage, conserving her energy and focusing her mind. Had bandaged her ribs as best she could with torn strips of cloth. The injuries from yesterday were bad but not crippling. She could still move. She could still fight. Sat beside her, his face pale with worry. I have been watching, he said quietly. He is fast for his size, faster than you would expect, and those claws can cut through metal. If he gets hold of you, it is over. He will not get hold of me, replied. How can you be so sure? Looked at him with calm eyes. Because I have been preparing for this fight my entire life. Not this exact fight, but every fight. Every opponent who was bigger than me. Every person who said I could not win because I was too small or too weak or too female. I have beaten them all. Is just another name on the list. The guards came for her at midday. They escorted her to the arena entrance and left her there to wait. She could hear the crowd above, chanting and roaring with excitement. Most of them were calling for her death. Some were calling for to make it slow and painful. But heard other voices too. Scattered through the noise, some aliens were chanting her name. Word of her victories had spread, and not everyone wanted to see her die. Something was changing. She could feel it. The gate opened, and she walked into the pit. The crowd's roar was deafening. Tens of thousands of voices screaming at once, the sound echoing off the metal walls until it felt like the entire station was shaking. Blocked it out and focused on the arena. She studied the ground, noting where the blood had dried slick and where the footing was solid. She measured the distance to the walls and the height of the barriers. Then the opposite gate opened and entered. He was enormous. Even among he was considered a giant, standing nearly 10 feet tall with scales that gleamed like dark armor in the arena lights. His arms were as thick as his entire body, and his claws were each longer than her hand. Old scars covered his chest and face, trophies from hundreds of kills. He looked at her with yellow eyes that burned with hatred. "Little human," he called out, his voice carrying over the crowd. "You have embarrassed my people long enough. Today you die, but I will not make it quick. I will tear you apart piece by piece so that everyone can see what you truly are. Weak, fragile, nothing." Said nothing. She settled into her fighting stance and waited. Stood in his platform above, raising his arms for silence. The crowd slowly obeyed, their voices fading until the arena was almost quiet. "This is the final match," he announced. "Champion of champions against the human female who dares to challenge our arena. The rules are simple. Fight until one cannot continue. Begin." Charged. He moved with terrifying speed, his massive legs propelling him across the pit faster than seemed possible for something so large. His claws were extended, and his mouth was open in a roar that shook bones. He wanted to end this quickly. He wanted to crush her and show the galaxy that humans were nothing but prey. Did not retreat. She ran straight toward him. The crowd gasped. Every being in the arena expected her to dodge or evade. Running toward a charging was insanity. It was suicide, but knew something they did not. She knew that expected her to run. Every opponent he had ever faced had tried to escape his charge. His entire fighting style was built around catching prey that fled. She was not going to flee. At the last possible moment, dropped. She went low, sliding beneath his grasping claws as they swept through the air where her head had been. She felt the wind of his strike pass over her and heard his roar of surprise as she passed between his legs. She came up behind him and jumped. Her hands found purchase on his scaled back and she climbed, spun and thrashed, trying to reach her, but she was already moving. She scrambled up his spine like she was climbing a living mountain until she reached his neck. She wrapped her arms around his throat and locked her hands together. Went berserk. He spun in circles, trying to throw her off. He reached back with his massive claws, tearing at his own shoulders, trying to grab her. One claw caught her leg and she felt it slice through her flesh, but she did not let go. He slammed backward into the arena wall. The impact drove the air from her lungs and she felt something crack in her chest. Stars exploded across her vision, and for a moment she thought she would black out. But she held on. Her arms stayed locked. Her grip did not loosen. Stumbled forward and slammed into the wall again. And again. Each impact sent waves of agony through his body. Blood ran down her leg from the claw wound. Her cracked ribs screamed in protest. But she held on. The crowd had gone silent. Every alien in the arena was watching with disbelief as the tiny human clung to the back of their greatest champion and refused to let go. His movements began to slow. His roars became weaker. He reached for her again, but his arms did not have the same strength. His legs wobbled. Squeezed harder. She had found his arteries, the blood vessels that carried oxygen to his brain. Physiology was not so different from Earth reptiles. They needed blood flow to their brains just like any other creature. Cut off that flow and even the mightiest warrior would fall. 10 seconds passed, dropped to one knee. 20 seconds, his claws scraped weakly at his own neck. 30 seconds, his eyes rolled back in his head. The giant crashed face first into the blood-stained floor of the arena. held on for another moment to be sure, then released her grip. She rolled off his back and landed on her feet, swaying but standing. Blood dripped from her wounds. Every breath sent fire through her broken ribs, but she was alive and was not moving. The silence in the arena stretched on and on. Nobody could believe what they had just witnessed. Nobody could accept that a human, a female human no bigger than a child, had defeated their unbeaten champion. Then someone in the crowd began to cheer. It was a single voice at first, joined by another, then another. Within moments the arena was shaking with sound. Not jeers this time, not calls for blood. This was something different. This was respect. Stood over the fallen giant and looked up at. The arena master stared back at her with something she had never seen in his eyes before. Fear. Release the prisoners, she said. We had a deal. Did not move for a long moment. Then slowly, reluctantly, he nodded to his guards. The cage doors opened and the human prisoners stumbled out, free for the first time in months. Had won. The aftermath of the fight spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Communications networks carried the footage to every station, every outpost, every world with a receiver. Within hours, billions of beings had watched the tiny human female defeat the undefeated champion. Within days, the video had been viewed more times than any event in galactic history. Did not see any of this at first. She was too busy trying not to die. The medical bay on the horizon was not equipped for the extent of her injuries. 3 broken ribs, a deep claw wound that had torn through muscle to the bone, internal bleeding, a concussion, and dozens of smaller cuts and bruises. The ship's doctor, a young woman named Amy, worked for 6 hours to stabilize her. When finally woke up, Lieutenant Carter was sitting beside her bed. His face showed something she had never seen there before. It looked like awe. "You did it," he said quietly. "You actually did it." Tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "Told you I could. The whole galaxy is talking about you. Every species, every world, everyone. They are calling you the human who broke the unbreakable. I just did what I was trained to do." Carter shook his head. "No, you did something more than that. You changed everything." He was not exaggerating. In the days that followed, watched from her hospital bed as the consequences of her victory unfolded across the stars. The human prisoners were returned safely to their families and ships, and the others gave interviews to galactic news networks, describing how a human soldier had risked her life to save them. They talked about the arena, the kidnappings, and the cruelty of the fight rings. For the first time, the galaxy had to confront what had been happening to humans in their space. But more than that, they had to confront what they had been wrong about. Ambassador reported that his communications had exploded with messages from other species. Delegations that had ignored humanity before were now requesting meetings. Trade offers arrived by the dozens. Military alliances were proposed by species who had never considered humans worth noticing. One message in particular stood out. It came from the High Council, the same species that ran the administration of Prime. "We have watched your people with interest for many years," the message read. "We believed you were too young, too weak, too primitive to matter in galactic affairs. We were wrong. A single human female demonstrated more courage and skill than we have seen from any species in generations. We wish to formally request diplomatic relations with Earth and to begin negotiations for mutual defense treaties." Similar messages came from dozens of other species. Some were friendly, some were cautious. A few were clearly afraid, but all of them shared one thing in common. They no longer saw humans as prey. Was released from the medical bay after 2 weeks. She was still sore and her ribs would take months to fully heal, but she could walk and move without assistance. When she stepped out of her room, she found the entire crew of the Horizon waiting for her in the corridor. They applauded. Was at the front, his face split in a wide grin. Stood beside him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Even Ambassador was there, clapping along with everyone else. "Welcome back, Sergeant Cole," Carter said. "The galaxy has been waiting for you." Over the next few months became something she had never expected to be. A symbol, a legend, the face of humanity for the entire galactic community. She traveled to dozens of worlds as part of diplomatic missions. Everywhere she went, crowds gathered to see her. Children of 100 different species asked for her autograph. Warriors from proud martial cultures requested the honor of training with her. News reporters followed her every move. Through it all, remained the same person she had always been. She did not boast or brag about her victory. She did not look down on other species or seek revenge against them. When asked about the fight, she spoke simply and honestly about what she had done and why. "I did not fight because I wanted glory," she told one interviewer. "I fought because my people were in danger and no one else was going to help them. That is what humans do. We protect our own." The interviewer, a journalist, leaned forward with fascination. "But how did you defeat? He was twice your size, 10 times your strength. Every analysis we have done says it should have been impossible." Considered the question for a moment before answering. "On Earth, my ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. We did not survive because we were the biggest or the strongest. We survived because we learned to adapt. We learned to think. We learned that technique can overcome raw power if you understand how to use it." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "The galaxy saw humans as weak because we are small, but size is not strength. Strength is what you do when everything is against you and you refuse to give up. That is what humans are. We are survivors. We are fighters, and we will never stop." The interview was broadcast across the galaxy. Millions watched and listened. And slowly, the perception of humanity began to change. It was not just about anymore. It was about all humans. Traders reported that deals were easier to close now. Human ships were no longer targeted by pirates who feared retaliation. Scientific and cultural exchanges began with species who had ignored Earth for centuries. Humanity had finally taken its place among the stars, not as prey, not as primitives, but as equals. One day, months after the fight, stood on the observation deck of a space station orbiting a distant world. She was alone, watching the stars turn slowly in the endless black. Carter found her there, holding 2 cups of something warm. "Thinking about the fight?" he asked, handing her a cup. Shook her head, thinking about what comes next. One fight does not change everything. There is still a lot of work to do. True, but it was a hell of a start. She smiled at that. "I suppose it was." Carter stood beside her in comfortable silence for a while. Then he asked the question that had been on his mind since the arena. "How did you stay so calm when you faced him? A creature twice your size trying to kill you. How did you not freeze?" Sipped her drink and considered the question. "Back on Earth before we had technology, humans used to hunt mammoths, giant creatures with tusks that could crush a person with one step. We did not have claws or fangs or armor. We just had pointed sticks in each other. But we won. We always won, because that is what humans do." She looked out at the stars, at the endless possibilities waiting for her species. A big lizard with an attitude was never going to be the thing that stopped us. Carter laughed. Out there in the darkness, the galaxy turned, and humanity, against all odds, had announced its presence in a way that would never be forgotten. They were here, they were ready, and they were not afraid.